Welcome to the Masters of Wellness podcast, your ultimate path to holistic health, wellness, and success. Discover the powerful fusion of Eastern wisdom and Western science, designed to balance your mind, body, and spirit. Our channel brings you holistic wellness practices, effective strategies to boost productivity, and insights on stress reduction and active aging. Join our global community and transform your life with holistic wellness. Cheers to a healthier, happier you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Masters of Wellness podcast, Season 2, Episode 1. Today, I'm joined by someone who truly walks the talk when it comes to creating impact in the wellness space, Grant Ian Gamble. Grant is a seasoned entrepreneur, best-selling author, keynote presenter, and strategist who has spent decades at the intersection of fitness, wellness, and business innovation. He's worked with organizations around the globe, spending over 20 years in the US developing wellness brands. Whether it's through leadership, technology, or grassroots change, Grant brings a deep and refreshing perspective to the wellness conversation. Grant and I did catch up in Melbourne for the Ignite conference. I got an opportunity to listen to Grant speaking. And one of the reasons why we wanted to invite him on the show today is because Grant is the kind of person that often stands on the stage, consults for businesses. He's always supporting people in the industry, but he seldom has an opportunity to share his journey and his story that has brought him to where he is today.
Thanks, Ed.
And I thought we might just start, if we go back, and I mean way back to the early days of Grant Gamble. What got you into this industry in the younger years of your life that inspired you to do what you're doing today?
That's a long way back, Ed, by the way, as you can notice by the grey in my beard. Yeah, so I got out of the military. I was not in a good place when I left the military. And I just went down a very slippery slope of alcohol and abuse, like of my body and myself. And at some point I hit an absolute low, and I just decided that I really needed to do something. So on one Sunday night, I'm sitting on the couch opposite my mate that I was living with, and we were both knocked out of our brains. And I said, look, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to join the gym on Monday. And he's like, what? Wow. Yeah, I've got to turn this around. This is a mess. I'm a mess. It's not good. So we both went to the gym on the Monday, signed up for a 12-month contract. I think he went 2 or 3 times and ended up dropping out, and I never stopped. So the industry actually, I think, probably saved my life, to be honest. I was on such a downward spiral. And fitness, I just fell in love with fitness. I started doing aerobics classes and working out in the gym. And then I got better and better at aerobics, and I did my first fitness leader course, again, many decades ago. Jamie Hayes and Ellen Hayes were lecturing on that course. That was Greg Hurst, and sort of Nigel Champion was floating around. So it was really back in the early days. But I did my fitness leader course, and I was working just in construction during the day, then in the club at night. Then I started teaching at the club and just ramped up from there. So what got me into fitness really was how I felt in the military. I felt powerful, strong, fit, and very capable. And then having migrated out of the military for a variety of reasons, really struggling. And so this sort of gave me my sense of confidence back, which is something I've been really excited to share with people over the years. Is I think one of our core products is not physique or fitness. It's actually self-esteem. It's actually confidence. So definitely the industry, that was sort of my turnaround moment, I guess.
So you're actually working with customers, right, in those early days? Like, do you remember your very first customer, like the first person that you inspired and helped into a life of health and wellness?
Well, I remember quite a few, actually. When I first started teaching classes, it was back in the days of, just beat people up, right? Just go as hard as you can. And if you kept going and the members didn't, that was a good thing. Kind of got the sense that wasn't a very healthy thing for me or the members. And so I remember a lot of members that were attracted to my classes because I really tried to engage them. one of those ladies was Lynn Boycebane. Lynn had struggled with weight and struggled in a lot of different ways with even her mental health, which we're talking 40 years ago, Ed. This is a long time ago. And people didn't talk about that sort of stuff, but we did talk about it a little bit. And she transformed literally over months. So, yeah, I remember a lot of those early members from the first club that I owned and onwards. I mean, that's the joy of this industry, isn't it? Changing lives. And I feel like a big focus for me, and we might talk about this later, but a big focus for me has been in that space for those people that really desperately need change, not the super strong or the super fit or those people that want to bench press 400 pounds. I've been really focused on those people that just need to be able to get up in the morning and look at themselves in the mirror and not feel too bad about themselves.
I also used to beat people up,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought the more that someone was suffering in the class, then the more successful my class was.
Yep.
However, I very, very quickly learned that I was losing customers that way because that's not what they were there for. And it only took like one or two of those customers that showed a different side of the benefits to what we were doing. For example, a lady one day showed up to class crying, and I said, "What's up?" She said, "I had a terrible day at work. My boss was troubling me, and a lot of stress. Can we just go for a walk today and have a chat?" I said, "Yeah, sure, no problem."
Nice.
So we walked out of the PCYC. I was working at the PCYC on the Gold Coast. There, I was teaching classes, and we just went for a walk around the park, had a chat. At the end of the class, we went back, did a little bit of a stretch, and she said, "I feel fantastic. Thank you so much for the class today." And for me, it was the least amount of effort that I'd ever done in a class because all I had to do was listen. But the benefit to the customer was far, far greater. And then that got me thinking a lot about other customers that I had. Is there something more I can do for them along the lines of listening more and engaging more with them personally rather than just focusing on the weights and everything for the day?
Yeah.
I realized very quickly, well, my programming needs to shift a lot. And that's where I kind of changed my approach as well.
Yeah.
Grant, you are an accomplished author. The book, The Affinity Principle, talks a lot about human-centered or human-focused leadership. And you did mention just now your first fitness center that you owned. Like, tell us about that. How did you go from training people to deciding I'm going to do this as a business and as a career?
Oh, it's a great question, Ed. I've been traveling around with my girlfriend at the time around Australia and just teaching classes and master classes all up and down the east coast of Australia. And, we stopped in this little gym up in Cairns, and we worked there for about a month. It was a nice little club, but it had gone bust 3 times in that same location, same configuration. And the owners called me in on a Saturday and said, "Hey, we're going to close the doors on Monday." And I'm like, "Hang on, we just ran a 12-month special, like paid in full special. We'd sold 200 or 300 memberships, of which I'd sold a whole bunch of those. And you're just going to close the doors on those people?" And that, well, we've just got our head above water. We're stepping away. You can have the club if you want it, right? Essentially free. But to take on all the leases for the equipment and the the rent of the building and everything else. But I didn't know what I didn't know, Ed. So I went, "Oh yeah, of course, I'll do that because this is a great club." So I went bust to the 4th time when I took it over. I didn't get any of the benefit of those 12-month membership that had been sold, but somehow we turned it around, and over the next 3 years, turned it into probably the most successful club in northern Queensland at the time. And it was all around people. Like the people that were there were great people. I mean, the team, and I mean the members. And we just became very welcoming. What was interesting about the facility or the little shopping centre we were in, there's a lot of wellness-related entities there. Chinese medical practitioner. There's a really nice little spa hairdresser. There was a great integrative doc there. I mean, it's pretty ahead of its time, this little sort of pod. I just started creating relationships with these businesses, and we would drive a lot of traffic, which would help them. But in turn, I do partnerships with them, community partnerships with them. And And so the relationships with the businesses around me sort of helped improve our offering and the value that members got. And members came to know that, like, it didn't matter what shape you were in, didn't matter how much you weighed or what you looked like, you were going to be welcome. And that sort of became our calling card. So we became this sanctuary. We call it the welcome mat, right? But we became the sanctuary. And that club went incredibly well. Ended up selling the club a few years later, going to run a large group of clubs down in southern Queensland. But that club really set the tone for how I felt like a club should look and feel. We put a little cafe in. We had a really nice little creche, and the creche had more than just a TV on the wall and a strip of carpet on the floor. We really tried to do interactive things with the kids. We wanted the kids to go out kicking and screaming, not come in kicking and screaming, because that made it easy for mum, right? And anyway, so that sort of set the tone for how I did, successively bigger clubs and more intricate models. But that little club was just it's funny. I'd be so happy to even be back there today because I love that club. I love being in that environment, that community.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people that have been in this industry for a long time, they have an affinity, pardon the pun, with the early days of the industry. Like you mentioned, some of the original masters of the industry and those first businesses, which we're talking decades ago. The fitness industry was quite different back then. And the clientele that were coming in were typically different to what we see today as well. The society and the cultural shift in people joining fitness and wellness centers now is quite different to back in those days. All of us guys back in the early days, all we did was bodybuilding, push as much weight as you can with your mates and grunting and groaning and wearing the singlets that have the big cutout on the side.
Yep. Guilty.
And yeah. And seldom would you see ladies in there. Especially, you would never see ladies doing strength training unless they were like a competitive athlete or something. And even those early days of aerobics. Actually, the person who inspired me into this industry was Biba, who is my mum. And Biba was one of the aerobics queens of the 1980s. She was the president of the Queensland Cube Fit Association in Brisbane. And she was one of those ladies back in the Jane Fonda days that would put on the long socks and the leotards and design her own cassette tapes with the tracks for the class.
Yep.
She'd do aqua classes. I remember when I was a teenager, I'd go along to her aqua classes, and I was responsible for pushing play on the cassette recorder when it was time for the next track. And then when that track finished, I'd press stop, and then people would have a little drink and a little rest, and then she'd give me the nod, and I'd press play again. I was like the DJ.
Yeah, wow. That's awesome.
And I think she kind of inspired all of our family. I've got 3 other brothers, so the 4 of us boys were all kind of into sports and health and fitness because our mum was a great role model. And seeing her enjoy what she was doing and be quite dedicated into what she was doing was quite amazing. But going back to those early days, the fact that you turned that business around means that you did something different to the original owners that had it. Maybe they were running it as a business targeted towards the type of clients that they believed were using it, or the people that were similar to what they were. But you, I guess, probably thought, who else can we invite to this fitness center? What other people in our community could benefit from health and wellness programs? And I believe that's where you kind of started to get into programming and look at what types of things are people looking for that are different to what's being offered now.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I did, which I'm not sure how much of this was conscious, it was just what felt right. And the club had a really nice big strength section right at the front of the club. And it was where the big guys would be dropping weights and grunting and doing all the things you're talking about. And they're really intimidating. And I'm like, I need to not necessarily get rid of the guys, but certainly move the section and maybe reduce that cohort if possible, because it's really intimidating. And I'd heard that from members. And so we did that. We moved the strength section and we cut it down. We took away some of the really heavy weights. We had a few disgruntled members that left and went to another club, a powerlifting club, which was a better fit for them anyway. But that really changed the tenor of sort of the front end of the club. And because it wasn't a big club, it was all on one floor and you could really see from one end of the club to the other. It really made a big difference. So people that would walk in to make an inquiry that had heard about the place weren't confronted by pretty intimidating physiques and people screaming and carrying on. So that was a pretty, I guess, targeted move in hindsight. But at the time, I was just like, oh, this doesn't feel good, and I don't think the members like it, so let's change it. Yeah.
It's no easy feat to write a book, like to be an accomplished author and to take your decades of knowledge and put it into something that makes sense and meaningful for people to read. So hats off to you for taking your experience through this journey, through this career and this journey to be able to put it into a book called The Affinity Principle. Those early days of that first business and then later on moving to Southern Queensland and managing a group of clubs, did you find you'd already built a business model or an operational system in your mind that worked in the smaller club that you then duplicated out to the larger group later on?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really, I think, why I got recruited for that job, to run that group, because there was two clubs initially. They had the World Gym franchise. So they had purchased the World Gym franchise for Australia. And this is back in the early 90s. And they were losing money, like a fair bit of money every month. And the owner reached out to me and said, look, we need to turn this around. He'd heard about the turnaround I'd done at this club. And so he invited me, and I said, look, if it's going to work for us, we really need to, I think, step away from the World Gym brand. And that was a pretty big move, right? And I said, I think we need to change it to something else, maybe World Fitness, for example, where it's more open, because the World Gym brand is really was very focused on bodybuilders and that sort of very small tip of the pyramid. And my experience and what I'd learned with the club that we're in was, if you can attract or be attractive to 80% of the population, not 5% or 10% or 15%, you're going to build a stronger business. So he bought into that, and we changed the name, we changed the logos, we transformed the clubs into World Fitness, and we grew it over many years into a large chain, including franchises, which we had a few of. There was about a dozen clubs in the end, and it was very successful. So I definitely used my experience in the smaller club environment to translate into this larger environment, and I think proved pretty clearly that if you can broaden your welcome mat and welcome more of your community into the club, and also create the right vibe in the club, the people that you hire, people to me are at the center of any health club success or any fitness or wellness center's success. Hiring right, training well, and then helping keep those people engaged is really critical, because they're the people that greet the member, connect with the member. One of the things, not to get off on a tangent, but I've sort of been ranting a bit about the attrition rates of team members in the industry lately, because it's pretty bad. We are up there with hospitality as being among the worst in terms of retention of team. And keeping your team engaged is critical, because they create relationships with the members, and then the members stick around because of those relationships in part. What you want is as many connections as possible inside the club, so that people have more reasons to come and to commune and to be with people they like. And so anyway, team for me was a critical element, and we put a lot of focus on team in those days. I'm still in touch with a number of those team members even today, and we catch up occasionally and have a little lunches or dinners or something. It's just amazing that 30 some years later we're still hanging out. That's good. Yeah. I love that.
I think it's a testament to those early days and your position as a leader and your approach as a leader. That's people who you inspired that are still working in the industry, that want to stay in touch with you, that have always seen you as a mentor. A mentor is a moment in time, because we are all evolving. The students are always evolving. The mentors are always evolving. People across the world in the industry, in every industry, are always evolving and improving. If they're not, then the student surpasses the master. That's sometimes what happens. But having known you for some time and following your journey, I did notice that you haven't only stayed in Australia. You've also traveled abroad and worked abroad for many years as well. So tell us about how that happened. Like, how did you go from being an Aussie and heading overseas?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. the World Fitness experience, I left there ultimately and bought another defunct club that had closed its doors many times. Turned that around, and I started consulting to clubs that were struggling. And so my client list was clubs that weren't making ends meet, were potentially looking to close their doors. They wanted to turn themselves around, and it's not a great client list when you think about it, because it's hard to get paid if those people aren't making money. But had great success, and ultimately I was presenting at conferences and talking about ways to build business. And I was presenting at URSA in 19. This gentleman in the audience came up to me afterwards and said, "Love what you're talking about, the sanctuary and creating this space for the uninitiated or deconditioned. I want to do that." He said, "Would you come over and spend a couple of months consulting to us to design a wellness center that can do that?" And I'm like, "Would love to," because I was consulting, so it was perfect. So in August of 97, I went across for what was supposed to be, actually September, sorry. It was supposed to be 2 months, 2-month contract. I ended up staying 11 years on that contract. We built the first club, I opened it, I actually ran the first club. I actually was the general manager of that first club for the first year or two, just to really dial it in and get it worked out. And then we built bigger and bigger campuses. And the campuses we're building, that club was about 6,200 square meters or 62,000 square feet, thereabouts. And we were popping at the seams because people love the environment. They love coming to this place that was so welcoming, that we then started expanding and building bigger and bigger campuses. I think the biggest campus we built was about 13,000 square meters under roof on 22 acres, and had a whole kids wing. And that was another piece of the puzzle too, was, how do we make movement attractive to kids? And, kids want to play. They don't want to do regimented exercise. And so we built what we called Adventure Central. And it was a place where kids could slide and run and jump and hop and do all sorts of fun stuff. And that took off as well. So we then had another part of that brand. So the journey was amazing. And the fact that the owner underwrote this, like, he really stepped up, because it took a lot of money and a lot of investment to build these models and to get these models up to level flight. And it was such a thrill to do that for me, because it was like the sky was the limit, right? We also integrated with a lot of allied health professionals. So we integrated physiotherapy. We integrated with local physician communities in all the communities we were in. We ended up with about 1,500 physicians up and down the Atlantic coast referring people to exercise, like writing a prescription for exercise, not for a drug. It's like, wow, that's sort of was the very exciting time of wellness really coming into its own. I didn't realize I was doing wellness back in my first club in terms of how we were approaching it. I got a sense of it as I moved into the 90s. And then by this time, I was in the privileged position to build some of the first and finest wellness centers in the States. I stayed there till 2008, came back to Australia for 4 years, and then went back again in 2012 and helped that same group over the next 4 years open up another series of campuses. So they ended up with almost a dozen campuses up and down the Atlantic coast. And yeah, it was just a wonderful journey, Ed, and stayed in the States till COVID hit, essentially, like till 2021.
Is that where you met your lovely partner?
It is. It's where I met Joanna, and we actually met at the Outback Steakhouse. So the Aussie would go to the Outback Steakhouse at night for a meal, because it was in the same large shopping centre that first wellness centre was in. And my office was based near that wellness centre. And I was actually building a house at the time. So I was in the throes of building this house. So I'd leave work, I'd go home, I'd work for 3 or 4 hours on the house. And then I'd go to the Outback Steakhouse before it closed to get a meal and a beer. And so I met Yana there. And yeah, the rest is history, I guess.
How many years together now?
21. So 21 years. Yeah. I'll be 22 this year in August.
Wow, incredible. There's 2 words in the English language, motivation and inspiration. And when I had the opportunity to speak at the Ignite conference together with you, that was one of the big differences I saw when I watched you speak. Motivation means motive, which means you've got a reason to do something. It's usually something that's pushing you from behind. So a personal trainer or a fitness coach often motivates their clients. It's like crack the whip and keep pushing people to do something. But inspiration comes from the word inspire, which means to breathe. It means breathing something in and it becomes a part of you. And it's not very often you get to watch a speaker or listen to a speaker that makes you internalize some thought and it becomes a part of you where you now want to follow this person rather than being pushed by them. Often at conferences, we have marketing experts, we have sales experts, we have all of the experts that are telling people this is what you need to do. If you want to be successful, you have to do this, this, this. But then once in a while, you'll listen to someone that says, this is what I've done. This is how it's worked. And you can consider, is this something that may work for you? And then that's an example of the gentleman that came up to speak to you afterwards and said, I really loved what you were talking about. I'd love to invite you to come and help us out with our company. That's what I believe makes a true master, when you can inspire people. And the same thing goes for if we talk about personal training or a fitness coach. Back in the early days, I hated doing sales. I hated thinking, how am I going to find more clients? How am I going to ask people to buy packages from me? And then one of my mentors, Kerry McAvoy, actually from the Australian Institute of Fitness.
He said,
he said, if you don't like doing sales, just make yourself the best fucking personal trainer in the world. So people will come and ask you to train them. So that's what I focused on. How do I make myself the best in the world? And then I focused on studying and researching and practicing and challenging myself with clients that were typically more difficult to work with, and built that reputation on the Gold Coast, where this is the guy you go to see if you really, really want to get results, or you really want someone that's going to listen to you. And it reached a point where you have a waiting list on a Monday and then a waiting list on a Tuesday for people to want to train with you. So then if someone called up and said, Ed, I can't make it today, I'd say, no problem, see you next week. And then immediately press a phone number, and then the next person, you can let them know, I've got a spot available for you. That's a wonderful place to be in as a trainer and also as a business owner. In business, everyone you see when you go on Facebook and LinkedIn now, all of the sales and marketing experts saying, do this, do that, use AI, you need to do these marketing campaigns and so on. It's all about pushing people to buy your product. How about making yourself the best damn fitness center in your community? How about having a reputation that you provide the best experience and the best service of anyone else around you in your district? Because word spreads faster than any type of marketing, right? And I know you've spoken about this in your book as well. Like, you want to talk a little bit, would you mind talking a little bit about that? Like, what advice do you give to businesses to attract more members?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think you're spot on, Ed. I was good at sales, like I could sell a membership because I was actually really committed to the fitness ethic. I believed in fitness and I believed in the change it could make in someone's life. So for me, I wasn't selling something. I was really giving somebody a gift. I was really sharing something with them that I knew they'd benefit from. So that was easy. In terms of marketing and, how we did marketing, I really let the members talk, and I encourage clubs to do that. And testimonials, I heard many, many years ago, testimonials are dead. Testimonials are alive and well, right? Even like Google reviews, right? People check out the reviews online to see, okay, what are people saying about this place? And so my advice to clubs is, firstly, and not to be rote, but be the best that you can be, right? Be the best in category. And in doing so, you set yourself apart. The way to do that, truly, in our industry, is to put people first, is to really think about, team, that they're well trained. Well, you've hired the right people to start with, but they're well trained, they're engaged, and in turn, they're giving the members a great experience. Every time the member walks through the door, they feel acknowledged, they feel seen, they feel appreciated. And that will create that no amount of marketing create. But as people come through the system, if you will, and they get results and their lives change and their lives open up. Those stories, tell those stories, right? But real stories. Too often the industry shows these images of body beautiful, like rippling abs, bulging biceps, tans, and oiled down bodies and sweat dripping off, and these amazing images that are incredibly intimidating, right? I'm talking about going the other way. I'd go into clubs, and what you were describing before, you'd have guys sitting behind the front desk. They could be a lovely person, but they're wearing a string tank top with their nipples sticking out, no name badge, and they look like seriously intimidating. You see this little old lady walk in, and she wants to walk straight back out. So, but back to the point, like by bringing real people forward, like the story of that older lady and her transition from not being able to walk without a cane to walking independently, or that lady that's had 3 kids and put on an incredible amount of weight and then who's just fallen into a hole, transforming into being proud of herself again and feeling good about herself, not because she's body beautiful per se, but she's doing something good for herself and she's changing her life. And the kids see that. And it's what you talked about with your mum. I do remember your mum, vaguely, only because I was at Northern Queensland then, I remember her name. And you get an inspirational figure like that around you, and it does. It has an impact. And so, anyway, back to the point, I encourage clubs to create this welcome mat where everybody feels welcome, to broaden it as much as possible. Now, I'd say if you're a powerlifting club, stick to what you do, right? And that's okay. Or if you're a bodybuilding club, stick to what you do. That's great. But for the general clubs, and I'd say at least 80% of clubs would fit into this category, you want to broaden your base as much as possible. So you really have to be welcoming to people of all ages, of all body types, of all persuasions. There should be no limits in terms of who should or could or would want to come to that club. And so creating that in marketing sense is just putting that stuff out there rather than rippling abs and bulging biceps that you see in all these ads for fitness clubs. Put real people out there and real stories out there where people have changed their life. And we would run a series of these testimonials, for example, and back in the old days where you would send postcards out, but you can do it on social media. But what people will do, they'll see this ad and that ad or this testimonial, that testimonial, but something will resonate. If you've got a series and enough different types of people, something's going to resonate and go, oh, he looks just like me, or she's in exactly the predicament I'm in. And when that person relates, then they transition to a point of going, okay, maybe that could work for me. Maybe I could do that.
Back in the days when I was working at the Australian Institute of Fitness, I saw that period of my life as my personal development stage. It wasn't really about that I was teaching curriculum and helping people to join the industry. But what we learned about personal development there far surpasses any other benefit. We used to listen to Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn, like all of these fantastic speakers to receive inspiration about like how to do business and how to be successful and things like this. We used to wear suits on the Gold Coast teaching personal training fitness classes. Now, a lot of people thought that was quite strange. During the middle of summer, there was a little bit of resentment from those having to do it because we're sweating, while we're up there teaching classes. But I remember very distinctly Kerry saying, this industry has a reputation and it's very intimidating for people that are not familiar with fitness or they're walking into a fitness center for the first time. They've got their own anxiety and their own baggage that they're carrying with them when they're walking up to reception. So we're not asking people to wear suits when you're at reception, but we're just talking about the extreme. Dress like a professional. The first impression is so professional that it shocks people and people think, oh my goodness, like this is completely opposite to what I thought it would be. It was explained to me like this. If you are a smoker and there's a group of people maybe sitting down at a restaurant eating and you decide to smoke, so you have a risk that you may offend some people or you may not, but there's a risk that you may. If you don't smoke at that table, then there's zero risk that anyone's going to be offended. If I'm teaching a class, if I'm standing on the stage, I'm doing a workshop or a seminar, and I decide to throw in an F-bomb, I swear, there is a small risk that someone in the audience may be offended. If I don't drop the F-bomb and find a different way to emphasize the point without swearing, then there's zero chance that anyone's going to be offended. In our industry, if we are sitting at reception or walking around the club with our little singlets and nipples hanging out, I'm talking about guys, right? If a man is walking around like that, there is a small risk that someone's going to feel intimidated by that. And they may not, but there is a risk. But if you dress professionally and cover up what you have, then there's zero chance that people walking in are going to feel intimidated. In fact, the opposite will happen. They will be pleasantly surprised that it's different to what they thought it might be when they first walked in. And even when you look at influencers online now, it's like going back 20 or 30 years. Like, influencers believe they need to show their sexy body and their big muscles to get clicks and to get likes and to get attention. That's not what it's about. It's about what can you share to other people that's going to help them and inspire them to want to live a life of health and vitality rather than just the image. And I think the industry has progressed significantly over the last 20, 30 years. That it's more about wellness now and less about the original visual that it used to be. But those elements are still in there as well. And I think we can never overemphasize the point of how you present yourself at the beginning. That first impression is the most powerful thing you can do in your business. And I remember working with a business called CMS, Club Management Systems, talked about experience zones. As a business owner, walk around your club and consider, what are the experience zones of my business? The first one might be your car park outside. When people are rolling up to the car park, what do they see? What do they feel? What's the stress level? Is it comfortable? Is it welcoming? Is it easy to find the entrance? That's the first experience zone. Some people roll up to the car park the first time, they can't find the car park, or it's messy outside and people parked up on the footpaths and things like that. And that's not a good first impression. So that first experience zone has failed. And the second experience zone is when you walk through those doors and you're looking at the reception, the person, the people that are standing there facing you for the first time. What's that experience like? What's the smell in that area? Is it sweaty? Is it funky? Or is it pleasant and fresh? And this is like a really nice place to hang out. And what do you see? And what's the sound like as well? Do you have like loud music blasting so you can hardly hear each other speaking? Or is it something more welcoming? And then you've got the locker rooms. That's another experience zone. A lot of fitness centers, a lot of business owners don't put enough attention on that experience zone for the members. I think as long as I have expensive equipment, as long as I've lined up 20 Technogym treadmills and I've got all of the weights that people need, then people will be happy. However, people need to change their clothes. They need to have a shower. They need to be standing on that floor with bare feet in the locker room and using their towels and in front of the mirror, drying their hair and things like that. What's that experience like? Is it something that makes people feel disgusting and dirty? Or is it something really pleasant, like a 5-star hotel? Fitness Cartel, I saw, has just opened a beautiful new fitness center in Australia. And I was looking at their videos and the way they presented it. And they've got Dyson hair dryers in the change rooms. They've got beautiful decoration. They've really, really paid attention to those small details, which people may not ask for, but when they see them, they think, wow, this is really over and above the expectation. And that's where I think the direction for people that are developing and redecorating clubs in the future, that's something you can consider. The different areas of your club, what's the experience in each of those areas? Not only how much did you spend on your fancy equipment. So Grant, I know that you also do workplace wellness programs. Like, how do you transfer your knowledge and the experience of working in the wellness industry and working with clients and helping businesses to succeed? How do you transfer that knowledge across to the corporate world?
That's a good question, Ed, because it felt like a natural progression to me. But I think the progression really started in the States, where I did a lot in the corporate wellness space. So we actually reached out to corporations, and over a third of our members came from companies over there. And so it was a big part of our constituency. And I was patently aware of the fact that fitness wasn't the only thing that we were purveying, and it wasn't the only benefit that we could provide to those corporate members. And so we're really thinking about their overall health, their holistic well-being. And when we developed Affinity OS, which is our AI platform to measure the team experience and then the member experience, we really did a lot in the member or team member engagement space. And we realized, and most recently in Australia, there's been actually legislation to mandate that there's psychosocial risk in the workplace, meaning that there's a risk to people in the workplace if it's not a healthy workplace. And I mean healthy from a mental health standpoint. And so as we were being exposed to this, what's happening in terms of workplace wellness, we developed our tool, the Affinity platform, to actually start measuring that as well. And that's sort of what pulled me into the workplace wellbeing space. I actually sit on the Global Wellness Institute's initiative for workplace wellbeing. And I know the cohort there, the initiative members, are just phenomenal people that really want healthy workplaces for people. And as much as we're in the fitness and wellness space, that's one element of it. But having a workspace where, you've got mindful leadership, you've got engaged team members, you have a workplace culture that embraces inclusivity and just team members having a great experience, right? That sort of morphed and became a central feature of what we do with our Affinity OS platform, because that way we can help health clubs and other businesses build retention among their team and drive members or drive memberships and customer acquisition. It just sort of followed. It followed from the book, the Affinity principle of mindful leadership leads to a great team experience, which leads to a great member experience, which equals financial results. And we were seeing a very direct relationship in the businesses that we were managing or measuring, the EMPS or the engagement factor, if you will, of clubs or businesses. We could see those businesses that weren't thriving, and the system actually would bring it into focus. And then adding that psychosocial risk piece really gave clarity to the leadership, to the executives, as to what they needed to do, as to what's going wrong and how they could right the ship. So I guess that's a long-winded answer, sorry, but it sort of was an evolution of our of Affinity OS into that space that we realized, wow, this is another facet and an important one.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Affinity OS is something I wanted to dig a little bit deeper on, because I've had experience using it. I've helped other business owners to implement it as well, and they've seen incredible results. You talk about something in Affinity OS called sentiment, the sentiment of the customer, the sentiment of the employees. And that word is a lot more meaningful than just the feeling or, are you happy to come to our club? What does that mean for a business? And it may not just be a wellness or a fitness business. It might be any business.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll start with NPS and the NPS because it's sort of the starting point. It's the data. NPS is the Net Promoter Score. It's essentially a metric that looks at how happy are your customers or your members with your business. And that's something you should ask every day. That's not something asked once a year. We measure that NPS, but we take it to another level where we don't just look at it from the perspective of the score. We look at the sentiment, and the sentiment is what people are saying and how they feel about the product or how they feel about your team or their experience. And so the sentiment for me comes out in a lot of different ways. So a club owner or a business owner can look and go, oh my goodness, look at this. We need to pay attention to this. So the sentiment really is the texture and the context. EMPS is the employee net promoter score or the team member net promoter score. And that's how engaged your team members are. Critical element. In fact, it's the first thing you should measure, really, because if they're not engaged, then your members probably aren't going to have a great experience. And that's what the affinity principle is based on. And so measuring that again and measuring sentiment and seeing the texture and context, it's so, so important. What we see with clubs that engage with the platform and look at the feedback they're getting beyond just the numbers, we see transformations that are pretty incredible, honestly. But it requires thick skin sometimes, because sometimes you're hearing stuff you don't want to hear. And that's challenging for some people, but for the club owners that I'm working with or we're working with generally, they're really open to this feedback into making those changes. And you can see it on that bottom line, which is really, at the end of the day, the baseline. So, yeah, it's a powerful system that starts with data but finishes with what you've described there. It's sentiment.
Yeah, having worked with a few different companies to help them improve their systems, their operational systems as a consultant and project manager, many companies have their KPIs, and the KPI is usually a leader that measures the key performance indicators of the people that are reporting to them and so on. It's like a cascading down form. What you're speaking a little bit more about here is, what do those staff members feel about the people that they're reporting to and the leadership decisions and the company as a whole? And as you said, it sometimes requires thick skin. However, you will learn much more about your business from reading and understanding that feedback than you will from anything else, because
Yes.
the sentiment of what you're seeing in those scores are predictors for what's coming in the next 3 to 6 months. If everyone in the company is pissed off and unhappy and not satisfied and feels stressed out and overworked, hey, you know what the next 3 to 6 months is going to look like. It's not going to improve. And unfortunately, a lot of companies say, just read the bottom line. What's our profit margin? What's our revenue? But that's not telling you the full story. That's just showing you the result for what's happened the 3 to 6 months before now.
Exactly. And it's a retrospective statistic, right? It's telling you what you've done right or wrong in the past. It's not telling you or prognosticating what might happen in the future. One of the things that's really powerful about NPS and ENPS is that when it's going up, your financials will follow. It's a given. It's been proven in many different industries over and over again. And so it's a predictor for you. And if it's going down, you can make changes in advance of it hitting your financials. And that's the power of it, is to have that ability to look forward. And again, what we're seeing is when the EMPS number drifts, the MPS number will follow. So you've got even more forewarning than the MPS number will give you, right? And it's powerful. And it's not just telling you that it's drifting, it's telling you why. And that's at the heart of, business leader, any owner, any manager, any executive is going to want to know why. Okay, not just that something's going wrong or something's askew. Why? What's driving it? And that's where the AI comes in. It bubbles that into focus, which is lovely.
Grant, while people are looking at this, can you explain perhaps 1 or 2 case studies where you have implemented the Affinity OS system and what you've seen from that and how those businesses have benefited?
Yeah, well, one of the clubs comes to mind. It's a small group of clubs, and I can't divulge who they are because they've shared some really great data with us, but they've increased their gross revenue by almost 23%, which is pretty incredible year on year. Their team attrition's gone down significantly, and they're saying that their team is staying often twice as long as what they'd been experiencing before, but they've gotten over 400% more referrals over the last year as a function of using the system, because the system essentially tags people that you might want to reach out to for a referral. But the member retention has gone up about 7%, and that doesn't sound like much. But a lot of that 7% is part of that 23% that those clubs are making, because they're not having to drive their marketing as hard to keep people, and it's not costing anything really to keep those members. And so a 7% increase on your retention rate is a massive impact on your bottom line. So those clubs, they're a lovely little club group. They were probably a little run down. The members were telling them that through the system and telling them some of the things that were bugging them. But they were also telling them the good things they were doing and sharing that. And the management did a good job of sharing that with the team, because the system, our system, is not just about telling you what's going wrong. It's about what's going right. What are you doing right? And with these clubs, they're able to compare to each other. Gets a little bit of competition going, but importantly, they're able to look at best practices. And you could see some of the clubs doing really well in the cardiovascular area, and others were doing great in the Group X. And the managers would start to talk to each other and go, "What are you doing? Why are you getting such good scores in that space when we're not?" And they really rose each other up. In that particular case, there was one club manager who was not doing a good job, and they weren't engaged. Their team was brought in. Long story short, that club manager's no longer with that club, and that club went from being bottom of the rung to being one of the top clubs in the group. leadership is very impactful. It often starts, or always starts, with leadership. So the system is not about, again, finding all that's wrong. It is about helping people see the bright lights as well. But it also will highlight when you've got a toxic culture or a toxic element in your business. And that's hard to see. The bigger you get, like the clubs that we're starting to really engage with are the big club groups, because you've got 50 clubs, you've got 300 clubs, you've got 700 clubs. It gets really hard to understand or have a sense of sentiment in those clubs. I mean, you can look at the financials, but getting this level of data and this level of granularity and comparative elements, it's really hard. And that's why we use AI. We were used to do all this manually in the clubs that I would run. And we'd use Excel spreadsheets and databases, and we'd stitch stuff together with code and whatever. But once AI came on the scene, we're like, okay, this is what we needed to scale. And the bigger a group is, the more benefit they get from the system. Whereas normally things start to fall apart when you get clubs, 100 clubs together. But this actually, the system gets better with the more input it gets. It's a learning system. So we have all sorts of different dashboards. Some of them are very simple, like the executive dashboard shows you what we call the affinity index, one number, just for them to look at, going up, going down, what's the trend. Beneath that is the NPS and the eNPS number. So it looks at what's the sentiment among team, what's the sentiment among members. And you can keep drilling down as deep as you want. Or the frontline team, that's where you connect with the member. And so that's really the magic here. The secret sauce is listening to members and responding. And then the other piece that we have is the word clouds. And they're really powerful because they are visual ways to see what are people saying, what are keywords. And are those keywords positive or negative, neutral? And a lot of our elements, as you can see, are very visual. And we also have an action plot, and that tells an executive, where should we focus our energy? What are the key things that we could do to change the trajectory or to improve the trajectory? And it's essentially a guide, and it looks at people's scores over time, and it determines what has pushed those scores up or down, and it brings them into focus for clubs. And the last thing's the club ranker or member ranker, it's called. And that's where we look at the clubs against each other. And that's a really powerful way to look at, okay, who's doing well and in what areas too, because not every club does well in every area. Some have strengths, some have weaknesses, and that's a really powerful tool. But the tools, goodness, it's pretty broad and deep. Now that we've added the psychosocial risk, we've added a whole new set of elements that people can look at. Really depends on what you want to toggle on or off. Some clubs just keep it really simple, just get the basics. But the bigger the clubs get, the more information they need, and particularly for things like psychosocial risk, because it's legislated in Australia that you need to measure that. And when club groups realise that, they're like, well, how do we do that? When we've got 50 clubs. And that's why we developed that side of the platform, and so they can toggle that on.
Well, it looks absolutely gorgeous. And I'm a visual person, so I really appreciate that the display can tell me at a glance what's going on. And then if I want to drill deeper, then all of the data is there to support it as well. I remember back in the early days, you probably remember this as well, there would be like a feedback box sitting at reception, and people would write a little note on the little post-it note, and they'd put it in the box, and the people at reception would open them. And if it's something that was negative, they didn't want the boss to see, then they'd throw it in the rubbish. But if it was something positive, then they'd keep it there and they'd show the manager and let the manager know they're doing a great job. So I think, AI and the technology has made this a lot more comprehensive and a lot more reliable as well. So I think we've come a long way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And those of you watching on YouTube and on our podcast, in the description, we've got a link there to the Affinity OS website and how to contact Grant directly as well. So I highly recommend it. As I said, the companies that I've consulted with and worked on some projects, it's been a no-brainer to implement it, and their feedback is positive. The results are almost immediate. I think it's a fantastic tool, and over and above anything else that I've seen in the industry up till now.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate that.
Grant, before we finish up, The future of the health and wellness industry, where are we going? What can we expect in the next 5 years?
Yeah, look, I honestly feel like we're migrating into a space that, and this might be my personal bias, away from the physical and into that sort of more holistic sort of presentation of what we offer. And so, where it used to be all about sweat and exercise, it's really moving to a space where people are looking at more from their club. Social elements within the club are expanding, and I think they're going to continue to expand. And it's certainly underwritten a lot of the success I've had with clubs and club groups is building that social element. So I can see integration of social club with health clubs. And I've actually done that in the States and advocated for it here because people want to commune. We're very isolated. And as a function of that, people are seeking a space to be comfortable and to meet people and to network, but not even in a formal way, just to grow a cohort of friends or like-minded people. And so I think that we're going to get away from it being so focused on the equipment and on the classes to being more focused on the community experience. If you look at blue zones, the success of blue zones where people live longer, the foundation of that is community. The foundation of that is connections. And I see clubs as a perfect place to do that and to expand that. So, I love all the recovery stuff. I love all the technology and all the great stuff that's coming out that helps people get fitter and healthier and track stuff and so on. But this analog element of connection and human connection from the point of people walking through the door through to the point of them finishing a workout and sitting down and having a smoothie with their friends or whatever, it's becoming more and more important and more in demand. And so we want to meet the market where it is. We're really going to have to focus on creating communities within our clubs and also having or building our clubs without walls. So creating connections into the community as well, not just thinking about four walls as the limits, but how do we connect with the community at large? And that's a whole other conversation about programming and things you can do there. But that's the exciting stuff that I see happening with the clubs that really want to make a difference, but also don't want to be competing with everybody else because everybody's competing in the same space right now with the same sort of equipment, with the same sort of offering. You got to differentiate yourself, and that's going to be the differentiator.
In saying that, earlier this week, I had a meeting with one of the global leaders of Les Mills. For those people that know me, I represent Studio Sweat On Demand, which is an on-demand virtual exercise class system for clubs to put into their business to take away the stress of instructors not showing up and some of the classes having not many people in them. So it's a great on-demand option. And Les Mills also does the same thing. They have the Les Mills On Demand. But I reached out to them because the first sentence I said to them is, we're all in the same industry and we all want the same thing. We want more people to move. We want more people to exercise. We want more people to engage into health and fitness habits. So that was my opening to the global leader of Les Mills. And immediately we struck it off and we had something in common, that this gentleman has worked in his position or his company for 17 years. So that's someone that cares about this industry a lot. And I think as we all go forward, Grant and I are a member of a group called Affinity Wellness Alliance, which will also add a link into the description. Welcome people in this industry to join. And if you're a master or a professional or a budding person in the industry that plans to see this as your career, join our group. We're all there to support each other.
That's terrific, Ed. And look, I agree. Co-opetition, but that's co-opetition. So it's not competition, it's cooperation with competition. And it's such a good, healthy way to approach things.
People that are considering to join the fitness or wellness industry, what's something you can let them know that's inspiring for them to know this is a good decision?
Well, I have to say, look, if you like people, right, if you like helping people, it's a wonderful industry to be in. Really, look, I know it's a tough industry sometimes. It's a 24/7 industry. It's weekends, it's weeknight. It can be very challenging in regards to the demands, but the rewards are amazing. So I'd encourage people to really think about it, but also look at the facility or the clubs they're joining or wanting to become a member or team member of. Because if you've got what it takes, you're a valuable asset to that club. So you can really choose where you go if you've built your skills and you have the requisite emotional intelligence and the things that clubs need. So be picky, be a little picky about who you align with, because some club groups see team as a commodity, and that's the truth. And I would encourage you to avoid that. Because you're not a commodity, you're a human, and you have much to offer. If you love this industry and you want to be a part of it, keep your head high and aim high.
I definitely agree. Those that are real people persons and are passionate about a healthy lifestyle, and they see themselves as someone that's inspiring to others, you are valued in this industry, and you will never have trouble finding great career opportunities as well. Just earlier, you mentioned about the creating the community and the smoothie bars and things like that. It brought a funny thought to my mind. I've been working in China for quite a few years. One of the first things we do every time we build a new fitness center here is we put a tea table and a tea room in close to the reception. They call it the $1 million table because that's where all of the transactions and the contracts are signed. Because obviously in the Asian and Chinese culture, sitting down, enjoying the tea, that process of the art of tea, the health, the mindfulness. And by the way, let's chat about your health and your membership at the same time. And it's almost impossible for people to walk away from that if you do it the right way. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah.
Well, Grant, it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you again and to have the opportunity to ask you some of these questions and learn from you. You are someone that's truly inspiring in this industry. And I look forward to our next chat and our opportunity to share more.